How does a Lancashire boy raised in a country where his faith is illegal, where priests are hunted like criminals, where celebrating Mass means death, travel across the sea to become a priest, then return to England knowing he will likely be captured, tortured, and executed as a traitor simply for being what God called him to be? What kind of courage sustains 18 years of hidden ministry, celebrating Mass in secret attics, hearing confessions in whispers, moving from safe house to safe house? Every knock on the door, potentially the last, until finally, inevitably, the pursuivants come and drag you to Tyburn for execution. And why is this Jesuit martyr who whispered Jesus' name over and over as executioners hanged, disemboweled, and quartered him unknown today, even to most Catholics? His story buried among 85 English martyrs beatified together, his individual witness lost in the mass of Reformation violence. This is the story of Blessed Thomas Holland, the forgotten Jesuit martyr of Lancashire, who spent 18 years bringing sacraments to English Catholics before dying at Tyburn whispering the holy name. His life proves that in ages of persecution, some choose priesthood knowing it means death, that serving souls matters more than saving your own life, and that the greatest courage is quiet faithfulness that no one remembers until heaven reveals it. Thomas Holland was born around the year 1600 in Lancashire, in the north of England. The rolling hills and quiet villages of that region held a secret that authorities in London desperately wanted to destroy. Lancashire remained stubbornly, defiantly Catholic, while the rest of England had largely accepted the Protestant Reformation imposed by Henry VIII and enforced by his successors. The families of Lancashire clung to the old faith with remarkable tenacity. They paid the price in fines, imprisonment, and blood. Thomas grew up in a recusant household, the term used for Catholics who refused to attend Anglican services. His family faced constant pressure. The law demanded church attendance on Sundays. Refusal meant fines that could bankrupt a family. Harboring a priest meant imprisonment or worse. Yet in homes like Thomas's, the faith survived. Mass was celebrated in hidden rooms. Rosaries were whispered after dark. Children learned their catechism in secret, knowing that the truths they memorized could cost them everything. The boy Thomas watched priests arrive at night, celebrate the sacred mysteries before dawn, then disappear before the sun rose high enough to reveal them. He saw his parents kneel for absolution, receive communion on their tongues, and weep with gratitude for sacraments that could send them to prison. He learned early that faith was not comfortable, that following Christ in England meant choosing the cross before the crown offered it. Something stirred in his young heart during those hidden masses. The whispered Latin, the flickering candles, the priest's hands trembling slightly as he elevated the host, all of it spoke to Thomas of something worth dying for. He began to understand that the men who risked everything to bring the sacraments were the true heroes of his age. And slowly, quietly, a dangerous desire took root. He wanted to become one of them. His family must have known. Catholic families in Lancashire recognized the signs: the boy who served Mass with unusual devotion, who asked questions about priesthood, who seemed drawn toward a path that led to either exile or execution. They did not discourage him. In that stubborn Catholic north, sending a son to become a priest was the highest honor a family could achieve, even knowing it might mean sending him to his death. The journey began with a sea crossing. Sometime in his youth, Thomas Holland left England for the continent, traveling to France, where English Catholics had established colleges to train the priests their homeland forbade. The English college at Douai had become the heart of the English Catholic mission, a seminary that produced not scholars for comfortable parishes, but missionaries for a country that would kill them for their vocation. Thomas arrived at Douai, carrying the faith of Lancashire in his heart and the knowledge of what awaited him upon return. The college made no secret of its purpose. The young men who studied there were preparing for martyrdom as much as ministry. The walls held portraits of former students who had returned to England and died at Tyburn, their bodies hanged, drawn, and quartered for the crime of priesthood. These were not warnings, but inspirations. Each martyred face reminded the seminarians that they were joining a company of heroes. The formation was rigorous. Thomas studied philosophy, theology, scripture, and the practical skills needed for underground ministry, how to celebrate Mass quickly and quietly, how to hear confessions in dangerous circumstances, how to recognize informers and evade pursuivants. He learned to live as a hunted man before he ever returned to English soil. During these years, Thomas felt called to something more. The Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, had become the most feared and hated order in Protestant England. To be a Jesuit priest in England was to face automatic death under laws passed specifically to destroy them. Elizabeth I and her successors saw Jesuits as papal agents, political subversives, threats to the throne itself. The very name Jesuit was enough to condemn a man. Thomas entered the society anyway. He made his vows, knowing they were vows unto death. He was ordained around 1624, his hands anointed to offer sacrifice, his soul configured to Christ the priest. The moment of ordination was also a moment of acceptance. He would return to England. He would serve his people, and he would almost certainly die for it. The day came when he crossed the Channel again, this time as Father Thomas Holland, Society of Jesus. Behind him lay safety, scholarship, and the company of fellow Catholics who could worship freely. Before him lay Lancashire, where souls hungered for sacraments and death waited for those who provided them. He did not hesitate. The shepherd goes where the sheep are, even when wolves surround the fold. For 18 years, Father Thomas Holland served as a secret priest in England. 18 years of hiding, of moving from house to house, of celebrating Mass before dawn and vanishing before noon. 18 years of priest holes and safe rooms, of whispered confessions and smuggled communion, of constant vigilance and endless prayer. It was a remarkable span. Most missionary priests were captured within months or a few years. Thomas lasted nearly 2 decades. His ministry centered in Lancashire, among the Catholic families who had sustained the faith through generations of persecution. They welcomed him into their homes knowing the risk. To harbor a priest was a serious crime. To harbor a Jesuit was worse. Yet doors opened for Father Holland throughout the region. He was their lifeline to the sacraments, their connection to Rome, their proof that the Church had not abandoned them. The rhythm of his days was shaped by danger. He might celebrate Mass in a great house one morning and a farmer's cottage the next. He heard confessions in haylofts and root cellars, anointed the dying in rooms where candles were quickly extinguished at any sound from outside. He baptized infants whose parents could not bring them to the Anglican Church for a Protestant ceremony they did not believe in. He married couples who wanted their vows blessed by a true priest. Every knock on the door could be the end. Pursuivants, the priest hunters employed by the government, prowled the Catholic regions, searching for evidence of illegal worship. They had informers in every village. They knew the signs of a household hiding a priest. When they came, Father Holland would slip into a priest hole, a tiny hidden space built into walls or under floors, and wait in darkness, sometimes for days, while searchers probed and prodded the house, looking for secret chambers. There were narrow escapes, moments when the searchers passed within inches of his hiding place, times when he fled through back passages while pursuivants entered through the front. The families who sheltered him showed extraordinary courage, lying to authorities, enduring searches, facing fines and imprisonment rather than betray the priest who brought them Christ. Their faithfulness matched his own. In 1642, Father Holland traveled to London. The exact reason remains unclear. Perhaps to visit a fellow priest, perhaps on Jesuit business, perhaps simply because the mission required it. London was dangerous territory for any Catholic priest, far from the relative safety of Lancashire's Catholic networks. But after 18 years of successful ministry, perhaps he had grown confident. Or perhaps he simply accepted that his time would come when God willed it. The arrest happened suddenly. Betrayed by an informer, captured by authorities who had long hunted Jesuit priests, Father Holland found himself in chains. The charge was high treason, not for any act of violence or political conspiracy, but simply for being a Catholic priest in England. Under the penal laws established by Elizabeth I and maintained by her successors, ordination abroad and ministry in England constituted treason against the crown. The punishment was death. They brought him to Newgate Prison, London's notorious jail, where so many priests had awaited execution. The cells were dark, the conditions brutal. But Father Holland had prepared for this moment his entire priestly life. The Jesuit formation had taught him to meditate on martyrdom, to unite his sufferings with Christ's passion, to see imprisonment not as defeat but as the final stage of witness. The trial was brief. There was no question of his guilt. He freely admitted his priesthood, his Jesuit identity, his ministry in England. To deny any of it would have been to deny Christ himself. The judges found him guilty. The sentence was pronounced: death by hanging, drawing, and quartering. In his final days, Father Holland composed himself for martyrdom. He prayed. He prepared his soul. He refused any offer of release in exchange for renouncing his faith or leaving England. The crown wanted apostates, not martyrs. They would have spared him if he had simply sworn an oath denying papal authority. But Thomas Holland had not spent 18 years in hiding to abandon Christ at the end. He had not become a Jesuit to die a coward. The scaffold would be his final altar. The morning of the 12th of December, 1642, dawned cold over London. Father Thomas Holland was brought from Newgate Prison, along with Blessed John Lockwood, another priest condemned to die that day. They travelled through the streets toward Tyburn, the execution site near what is now Marble Arch, where generations of Catholic martyrs had offered their lives for the faith. The crowd gathered to watch was mixed, some hostile, some curious, some secretly Catholic and present to pray for the dying priests. Tyburn had become a place of pilgrimage for English Catholics, the soil soaked with martyrs' blood, the site where their heroes had proven their faith unto death. The method of execution was designed to maximize suffering and humiliation. The condemned would be hanged until nearly dead, then cut down while still conscious. The executioner would then disembowel the victim, burning his entrails before his eyes. Finally, the body would be quartered, cut into pieces, to be displayed as a warning to others. It was barbarism dressed in legal procedure, cruelty sanctioned by the state. Father Holland mounted the scaffold with the calm that marked all the Jesuit martyrs. He had meditated on this moment for years. He had watched it in imagination during his seminary days at Douai, contemplated it in prayer during his hiding years in Lancashire. Now it had arrived, and he was ready. When the noose was placed around his neck, when the cart was pulled away and his body dropped, the crowd heard something that would be remembered long after. As consciousness faded and returned, as the executioner did his terrible work, Father Thomas Holland began to whisper. Over and over, with whatever breath remained in his tortured body, he repeated a single word: Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. The name that saves, the name above every name, the name that Thomas Holland had served for 42 years and ministered in secret for 18. As his body was destroyed, his soul clung to that name. As the crowd watched in silence, some weeping, some praying, the whispered invocation continued: Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. He died with that name on his lips. The executioner completed his work, but the victory belonged to the priest who had turned his execution into an act of worship. Thomas Holland had offered his final mass, his own body, the sacrifice, the holy name his consecration, Tyburn his altar. For nearly 3 centuries, Father Thomas Holland lay in relative obscurity. His name appeared in lists of English martyrs, his story preserved in Jesuit records, but he remained unknown to the wider church. He was one of hundreds who had died for the faith in England, too many to remember individually, too numerous for any single story to stand out from the mass of suffering. Then, on the 15th of December 1929, Pope Pius XI beatified Thomas Holland along with 84 other English and Welsh martyrs. It was the largest group beatification in church history at that time, a recognition that the English persecution had produced not just individual heroes, but an army of witnesses, a communion of saints who had together sustained the faith through generations of violence. Thomas Holland became Blessed Thomas Holland. His feast day was established as December 12, the anniversary of his martyrdom. Yet even now, he remains largely unknown. Most Catholics have never heard his name. His individual story is lost among the 85. his witness buried in the statistics of Reformation violence. But perhaps that anonymity is fitting. Thomas Holland never sought fame. He spent 18 years in hiding precisely because he wanted to serve, not to be celebrated. He chose a vocation that promised only danger and death, asked for nothing in return, and received exactly what he expected. His obscurity is itself a final witness, proof that faithfulness matters more than recognition, that service counts even when no one remembers, that God sees what the world forgets. Today, Christians still die for their faith in numbers that would have shocked even the English martyrs. More believers are martyred each year in our age than in any previous century. The persecution that Thomas Holland faced has not ended. It has merely moved to other countries, other contexts, other forms of violence. His witness speaks directly to our time. Courage is still required. Priesthood still demands sacrifice. And the name of Jesus, whispered in suffering, still conquers death. 18 years of faithful ministry in hiding. One December morning at Tyburn. A whispered name that echoed into eternity. Blessed Thomas Holland, one of the forgotten 85, remembered by heaven, waiting in glory for the recognition that earth denied him. The Jesuit martyr who died whispering Jesus. Proof that the greatest victories are won in silence, that the truest heroes are often unknown, and that a soul departing this world with Christ's name on its lips has already arrived home.